Sophie woke up like any other day. The sun streamed through her window, and she could hear the faint sounds of her family moving around the house. It felt normal, almost mundane, as she went through her morning routine, getting dressed and preparing for school. But something was wrong, something she couldn't explain. It was as if a heavy weight had settled over her, pressing down on her chest. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly off. Her heartbeat quickened, and her hands trembled slightly as she zipped up her backpack, though she didn't know why. She paused for a moment, looking out of the window, and for the first time, everything seemed distant. The world outside felt foreign, unfamiliar, as if she were viewing it from the wrong side of a dream. She felt detached, as if life itself was slipping away from her. She couldn't understand it, but she knew deep down that she wasn't going to school today. She wasn't going anywhere. Then everything went black. The world around her disappeared in an instant, as if it had been swallowed by darkness, and she felt herself falling into an unknown abyss. Her body was frozen, unresponsive, yet her mind was awake, alert, and aware of everything around her, even though nothing made sense. In those moments, she realized the truth. She had died. There was no doubt, no confusion in her mind. She was no longer in the world she had known. What followed was something beyond comprehension. On the other side, she was faced with a reality so alien, so haunting, that she couldn't fathom how she had ended up there, or why it was happening to her. It was a realm where the rules of life and death didn't apply. She felt lost, abandoned, and overwhelmed. The overwhelming sadness that gripped her heart left her breathless. She wondered if everything she had believed in, everything she had known, was a lie. Was there more to life and death than she had ever realized? What did it all mean? Was there something greater waiting for them on the other side? She felt the weight of these questions press heavily upon her, and as she began to understand the magnitude of what had happened, she realized something even more terrifying. She wasn't ready for what was coming next. How could she be? How could anyone be? No one had prepared for this. And what was she supposed to do now? What if everything she thought she knew about the world, about herself, was a mere illusion? What if the real truth had been hidden from her all along? The questions swirled around her, unanswered, as the unknown stretched out before her, promising to reveal things she could never have imagined. Would she be able to face what was coming? Would anyone? And in that terrifying moment, Sophie understood one thing with perfect clarity. There was no turning back. This was just the beginning. Sophia had always considered herself an ordinary teenager, a girl whose life followed a predictable pattern. At 17 years old, she was a student at the local high school in a small town that seemed to revolve around the daily grind of school, homework, and friends. Her life was a routine, one she had come to expect and accept without much thought. She had a group of close friends, but she wasn't particularly popular, and her social life mostly consisted of after-school hangouts, quick text messages, and occasional weekend outings. For Sophia, the most important things were her grades and making sure she did everything in her power to secure a spot in a good college. Everything else came second. Sophia was the type of person who tried to keep things under control, and for the most part, she succeeded. She had her life planned out, or at least, she thought she did. She believed in God, but her faith often took a back seat to her more immediate concerns. She attended youth group on Sundays, but that was more about socializing than deep spiritual connection. Her focus was on what she could control: studying, getting into college, and doing what was expected of her. The future was her main concern. She worried about getting good grades, about meeting the expectations placed on her, about what would happen next. But on the morning of October 22nd, everything felt off. It was just another typical day, or so she thought. The sun peeked through her bedroom window, casting warm rays across the room, but there was something unusual about the way it felt. The air felt thick, almost heavy, as if the atmosphere itself was pressing in on her. She couldn't explain it, but it was as though something inside her was telling her that today wasn't going to be like the others. Something was about to change, but she couldn't figure out what it was. Sophia went through the motions of getting ready for school, brushing her teeth, pulling on her jeans and sweatshirt, but each task felt distant, as though her body was going through the motions without her truly being present. It was as if she were on autopilot, and no matter how hard she tried to shake the feeling, it wouldn't leave her. There was an unsettling sense of emptiness, like a void inside her that she couldn't fill. It was the kind of feeling that you get when something is just a little bit wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on it. She sat down at her desk to check her phone, mindlessly scrolling through messages and notifications, trying to distract herself from the growing unease in her chest. Her friends were talking about their plans for the weekend, the usual mundane topics: school, relationships, what they would wear to the next party. But for Sophia, it all seemed trivial. Everything around her felt like it was moving in slow motion, like she was disconnected from the world she had always known. The noise, the bustle, the chaos of teenage life all felt distant, as if she were watching from the sidelines rather than participating. It was in that moment, as she glanced out her bedroom window, that it hit her. The world felt wrong. The town she had grown up in, the familiar streets she had walked 1,000 times before, suddenly seemed foreign to her. It was a feeling so intense that it took her breath away. The sky was the same color as always. The trees outside her window still swayed gently in the wind. But everything felt disconnected. She couldn't shake the sensation that something was coming. Something she wasn't prepared for. Something that would upend everything she thought she understood. She stood up from her desk, walking to the window and pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The town below her looked peaceful, as it always did in the morning. But now, it felt like she was seeing it for the first time, as if her eyes had been opened to something she had never noticed before. Her heart pounded in her chest, an inexplicable sense of dread settling over her. She had always been the type to push her worries aside, to focus on the things that were in front of her. But today, for the first time, she felt like everything was teetering on the edge of collapse. She shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. It was just nerves, she convinced herself. Perhaps it was the stress of school or the pressure of her upcoming SATs. She had been focused on so many things lately that maybe her mind was just playing tricks on her. But deep down, she couldn't ignore the feeling that something had shifted. Something deep inside her knew that things would never be the same again. Sophia's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her mother calling from downstairs, telling her that breakfast was ready. With a deep sigh, she reluctantly left her room, trying to push aside the strange sensation that had gripped her. She had no idea that this feeling, this unease, was just the beginning of something far greater, something that would change the course of her life forever. But for now, she forced herself to follow the routine, to go downstairs, eat her breakfast, and go to school. As she left the house and headed to school, she tried to shake the overwhelming sense that something was waiting for her, something beyond her comprehension. But the truth was, she wasn't ready for what was coming. She couldn't be. None of them were. Sophia's world began to dissolve around her in a way that she couldn't comprehend. It was subtle at first, a vague feeling creeping into her consciousness as the day wore on. But soon, that feeling became undeniable. It started with a light dizziness, a sense that something was wrong, but she couldn't quite pinpoint what it was. Her vision blurred momentarily, as if her mind had been pulled out of focus. She tried to shake it off, but it lingered, tightening its grip around her. Her body felt disconnected, as though she were no longer fully present in the space she inhabited. It wasn't until the dizziness grew more intense that she realized something had shifted, something fundamental. She felt it first in her chest, a sharp sensation like the breath being stolen from her. Her heart, once steady, began to beat erratically, and in that moment, she knew that her body was no longer under her control. The pulse in her veins seemed to slow, each beat growing more distant, more faint, until it was almost as if her heart had stopped altogether. She felt the emptiness growing within her, a vacuum that swallowed every thought, every shred of awareness. Her limbs felt heavy, unresponsive, as if they had turned to stone. Her body slumped, but there was no pain, no immediate shock to her system. It was as though she had slipped out of her own skin, becoming an observer rather than a participant. The physical sensations that had defined her existence, the touch of the air on her skin, the pressure of the floor beneath her feet, all faded into a distant memory. She no longer felt bound to the physical world. Her body lay motionless, a lifeless shell in the corner of her bedroom, but she could still think. Her mind was active, her thoughts crystal clear. The disconnect was complete, and yet she was aware of everything happening around her. And then she felt it. A presence. A shift in the air, subtle yet undeniable, as though the very fabric of reality had been stretched thin and was now vibrating with something beyond the world she had known. The feeling was warm, enveloping, like being wrapped in a blanket of pure love. It wasn't just a comforting sensation. It was all-consuming, sweeping her up in a wave of warmth that pushed aside every ounce of fear or doubt. It was an overwhelming force of love and peace that filled her to the core. In that moment, she understood that whatever was happening was not just a figment of her imagination. This was real. She was not alone. And there, before her, as if he had always been there, was someone she couldn't quite recognize. Yet she knew deep down that she had always known him. The presence she felt solidified, becoming clearer, sharper, until she could see him. He was standing before her, his figure radiant with an inner light that made him glow, as though he was part of the very light of the world. At first, she could hardly believe her eyes. This wasn't the figure she had seen in church or in paintings. It wasn't the Jesus of stained glass windows or childhood stories. This figure before her was different. He was young, not much older than herself, with eyes that seemed to hold the depth of the ocean, and a gaze that was filled with such warmth that she felt like she was the only person who mattered in the entire universe. His presence was so powerful, so undeniably real, that it was impossible to dismiss. He smiled at her, a smile that seemed to stretch beyond the limits of the world, and in that smile, she felt the entire weight of her existence. Every worry, every fear, every unanswered question slip away, like water flowing through her fingers. His smile was not just an expression, it was an invitation, an understanding that spoke to her soul without words. She felt his love, not as an abstract concept, but as a tangible force that enveloped her, making her feel complete and whole in a way she had never known before. Sophia wanted to speak, to ask who he was, to understand what was happening to her, but her voice failed her. No words would come. Instead, she reached out, almost instinctively, her hand trembling as it extended toward him. And as soon as her fingers brushed against his, a surge of warmth spread through her entire being. It was as if every part of her, every piece of herself that had been lost, was being pulled back into alignment. The emptiness, the confusion, the fear. They all melted away, replaced by a profound sense of peace. The pain she had felt in her chest, the emptiness in her soul, was gone. In that single moment, everything was clear. She no longer had to question anything. She had found what she had been searching for, even though she hadn't known it was what she needed. He was there, and with him, all things seemed possible. There was no more fear, no more uncertainty. There was only the presence of love, unconditional and pure, and with it, a peace that transcended everything she had ever known. Sophia looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she didn't feel alone. She didn't feel like an outsider in her own life. She felt seen, heard, and understood in a way that words could not express. She knew, without a doubt, that she was in the presence of something far greater than herself. It was as if the very fabric of the universe had bent to welcome her home, and she was exactly where she was meant to be. And in that quiet moment, with her hand still in his, everything she had ever feared seemed small and insignificant. The questions that had tormented her, the doubts she had carried, all faded into the background. She wasn't just alive in that moment. She was awake in a way she had never been before. And as she stood there, enveloped in his presence, she felt the true weight of what was happening. This was only the beginning. Sophia stood there, her hand still gently held by his, the weight of his presence sinking deep into her soul. The world around her seemed to fade even further, as if it was nothing more than a distant memory, and all that mattered was the figure before her. The love and warmth emanating from him enveloped her completely, leaving no room for doubt. She felt, for the first time in her life, a profound sense of purpose. Something greater than herself was unfolding, and she was a part of it. He gazed at her with a tenderness that went beyond understanding. His eyes, deep and endless like the ocean, seemed to hold the weight of the world and the light of every star in the universe. And as he looked at her, it was as though he saw not just the surface of who she was, but everything she had ever been and everything she could become. There was no judgment, no condemnation, only understanding. She felt as if she were known in a way that no human being could ever know her. Without saying a word, he stepped closer, and though she had no idea how, she understood that he wanted her to know something. There was something urgent, something important that she needed to see. She had felt it since the moment she had first awoken in this strange place, a sense of significance, as if her life had been leading to this very point. But now it was as if the moment had arrived, and she would finally understand the meaning of everything. "I have brought you here for a reason," he said softly, his voice resonating through her entire being. "You need to see what is coming, and you need to help prepare those who are still blind to it. You have been chosen because your heart is open, your soul still believes in things unseen. There is a mission for you, one that only you can fulfill." Sophia's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't fully grasp what he was saying, but deep down, she felt the truth in his words. She had been chosen for something, something that would change not just her life, but the lives of everyone she knew. She was meant to bear witness to something far greater than herself, and somehow, she had been selected to share it with the world. As his words sank in, he began to speak of what was coming, what she needed to know. "Soon," he said, his voice growing more serious, "a darkness will cover the earth. It will last for 3 days, a darkness so complete that the world will feel as though it is ending. But before that happens, I will send 3 signs, 3 warnings that will allow those who are ready to prepare. These signs will give them the chance to come together, to seek the truth, and to find the strength to face what is coming." Sophia could feel the weight of his words, the gravity of what he was saying. The idea of darkness covering the earth for 3 days was something she couldn't even begin to comprehend. It sounded impossible, like something out of a story, yet the way he spoke of it, with such certainty and calmness, made her believe that it was not just a warning, but a truth that had to be accepted. The world as she knew it would change, and soon. The clock was ticking, and there was no turning back. The first sign, he continued, will be a sound like nothing you've ever heard before. It will be beautiful, but powerful, deep, and resonant. It will fill the air and be heard by every person on Earth, no matter where they are. This sound will not be a mere noise. It will be something that awakens the hearts of those who hear it. It will stir their spirits and make them realize that something is about to change. The sound will last for exactly 7 minutes. During that time, the hearts of my people will be awakened, and they will know, deep in their souls, that they must prepare. Sophia listened intently, her mind racing. A sound that would awaken hearts, stir souls. It seemed impossible, yet it felt undeniable. She couldn't even imagine such a thing, but the certainty in his voice made her feel that it would happen, just as he said. The second sign, he continued, will be lights in the sky. Over 3 nights, strange lights will appear. These lights will not be like any you have seen before. They will be bright and beautiful, shifting in colors that have never existed in the world you know. The people who are listening, who have heard the first sign, will know what these lights mean. They will see them and understand that the time is near. They will gather together, prepare their homes, and seek the safety of their families. But not everyone will understand. Many will be blinded by fear, and they will run, unable to face what is coming. Sophia felt a deep sense of dread mixed with wonder at the thought of these lights. She could not fathom such a sight, yet the image of it filled her with a strange sense of anticipation. These signs, these strange and mystical occurrences, would be the beginning of something far bigger than anything she could have ever imagined. The third sign, he said, pausing for a moment, will be the silence. For 1 hour, the entire world will fall silent. Every machine made by human hands will stop working. There will be no cars, no phones, no electricity. Even the air itself will seem still, as if the world itself is holding its breath. In that silence, people will be forced to listen, to confront themselves and each other. It will be a time of reckoning, a moment when they must decide whether they are ready to face the darkness that will follow. Sophia's heart sank as she imagined the silence. A world without sound, without movement. It seemed surreal. But she knew, deep within herself, that this would be the moment of truth. The silence would be the test, the final chance for people to prepare. The question was, would they be ready? He looked at her, his gaze filled with both sadness and hope. Those who have prepared their hearts will not fear the darkness, he said. They will use the time of darkness to draw closer to one another and to me. But those who have not prepared, who have ignored the signs, will be consumed by fear, unable to find peace. Sophia felt a rush of emotions, the weight of his words pressing down on her like 1,000 pounds. She was overwhelmed, but there was no denying the truth in his message. The world would change, and it was up to her to help prepare it. She wasn't sure how she would do it, but she knew that she had no choice. The time had come, and she was meant to be a part of it. The first sign came unexpectedly, and when it did, it was unlike anything anyone could have imagined. The sound echoed through the air, a sound so pure, so deep, that it seemed to come from every corner of the earth at once. It was not a noise, not in the way people were accustomed to hearing. It was a melody, but one that transcended all music, vibrating through the very core of every living thing. It was beautiful, yes, but there was something in it that made people pause, something that made them stop what they were doing and listen, really listen. Sophia felt the sound before she heard it. It washed over her, a tremor that started deep inside and resonated outward, through her bones, her chest, her heart. It was as though the earth itself had decided to sing, and she was caught in its reverberations. For a moment, she felt weightless, as if the world around her had ceased to matter. This sound was not just heard with the ears, it was felt in every fiber of her being. It was the kind of sound that made people stop, drop everything, and acknowledge that something profound was happening, even if they couldn't fully understand it. Around her, people began to react. In cities and fields, on streets and in homes, the sound reached everyone. It was impossible to ignore. Some people stopped in their tracks, kneeling in reverence, their faces upturned as if they were waiting for something. Others looked to the sky in wonder, their eyes wide with awe. There were those who felt the pull of something greater and immediately dropped to their knees, overwhelmed by the power of the sound, feeling the weight of 1,000 unspoken emotions. But there were others, too. Those who panicked, who couldn't handle what was happening. They covered their ears, running away from the sound as if trying to escape something they could not comprehend. Fear and confusion took hold of them, and in their rush, they only became more lost. But for those who had listened with an open heart, something within them stirred. They knew this was not a random occurrence. This was a sign, and it was time to prepare. As the first sign faded, the second one followed. A strange light appeared in the sky, not like any light that had ever illuminated the earth. It wasn't the light of the sun, nor the soft glow of the moon. This light was different, otherworldly. It wasn't warm, but it was bright and captivating, casting colors that no one had ever seen before. Vivid purples, brilliant golds, and shimmering whites danced across the horizon, swirling like curtains in a cosmic wind. The light stretched across the night sky, visible from every corner of the world. It wasn't just a spectacle, it was a message. Those who had heard the first sound understood immediately. The time was near. The light wasn't just beautiful, it was a call to action. People gathered together, coming out of their homes, staring up at the sky in silence. There were some who prayed, gathering in small groups, asking for guidance, for understanding. Others, still in disbelief, stood frozen, watching the sky with wide eyes, unsure of what to do, but knowing deep within themselves that the world was on the cusp of something monumental. For those who had heeded the first sign, the second light was a confirmation. They knew that this was not just some natural occurrence, some unusual cosmic event. No, this was the last warning, the last opportunity to prepare. They began to move, gathering their families, making sure their homes were safe, preparing for what was to come. It was a time of reflection and urgency, a time to put aside the distractions of the world and focus on what really mattered. They knew that the darkness was coming, but they also knew that the light had given them a glimpse of what was to come. The third sign was the most unsettling of all: silence. It was an unnatural silence, a stillness so complete that it felt as though the world itself had stopped moving. The hum of machines ceased, the constant buzz of technology vanished. There were no cars on the roads, no phones ringing, no chatter in the streets. It was as if the earth had drawn a deep breath and held it, waiting. People stood in the quiet, unsure of what to do. Some walked into the streets, calling out to their neighbors, seeking connection in a world that had suddenly stopped spinning. For the first time in years, people looked at each other instead of their screens. Conversations that had been long overdue took place in hushed tones, as if the silence had allowed them to hear what they had been avoiding. There was no rush, no sense of urgency in the air. Instead, there was only a deep, reflective stillness, as if everything was falling into place. In this silence, something incredible happened. The constant distractions of the world were gone. The noise, the constant hum of modern life, had disappeared, leaving only the raw, unfiltered presence of the people. They began to talk. Really talk. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years shared their thoughts. families gathered in ways they hadn't in a long time. People who had been disconnected from each other, from their own hearts, found themselves reconnecting without the interference of technology or everyday distractions. It was a time of reckoning, a moment when people were forced to face the silence that had been imposed on them, both in the world and in their own hearts. For some, this was a moment of peace, of clarity, as they took stock of their lives and what truly mattered. For others, it was a moment of fear, of panic, as the weight of what was coming bore down on them. The silence, though uncomfortable, was necessary. It was a test, a way to force people to confront what they had been avoiding, to make them question their lives and their choices. And as the minutes stretched on, the world began to shift. Some accepted the quiet as a blessing, a chance to prepare. Others fought against it, trying to fill the void with the noise and distraction, but it was too late for that. The silence had already done its work. It had made people see the truth. In that moment, the world was on the verge of something far greater, and everyone, whether they realized it or not, was being prepared for what was to come. The signs were all there, the sound, the light, the silence. And now, there was no turning back. The 3 days of darkness were approaching, and the time to prepare had almost passed. When Sophia returned to the world she had once known, everything felt different. The moment she stepped back into her body, there was a sharp sense of disorientation. The hospital room around her felt strange, as though she had been away for far longer than just a few minutes. The beeping of machines, the soft murmur of voices in the background, everything felt distant, like it belonged to someone else's life, not hers. But it was hers, her body, her world, the world she had left behind. Yet, despite the physical familiarity of the room, she couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of something missing, something irrevocably changed. She had been to the other side, seen things that no one could truly understand unless they had lived through it themselves. And now, she had to live with this knowledge, this burden of truth. Her mind raced with thoughts of the signs, the warnings, and the coming darkness. She had seen the future, had witnessed the urgency of the situation, but now, standing in this world again, she wasn't sure how to share what she knew. Some people would be ready for what was coming, and some wouldn't. That was the truth she had learned from her encounter with Jesus. There would be those who listened, who understood the signs and acted accordingly. But there would also be many who ignored it, who refused to believe, even in the face of the undeniable. The conflict was clear. The divide between those who would prepare and those who would be swept away by the storm. Sophia felt the weight of this truth pressing down on her chest, and it terrified her. How could she make people see? How could she get them to understand that time was running out? The room felt colder than before, but it wasn't the temperature. It was the silence. It was the heaviness of knowing that the world, her world, was on the brink of something monumental, and yet people were going about their lives as if nothing was wrong. They couldn't see what was coming, couldn't feel the same urgency that she did. She knew that this moment, this fleeting, fragile moment, was all she had. The time to act was now, and there was no turning back. She had to speak, even if no one would believe her. Sophia's thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice. Her mother's voice, calling her name. The familiar sound of her mother's concern brought her back to the present. Sophia turned her head slowly, her eyes meeting her mother's tear-streaked face. Her heart ached as she saw the raw emotion in her mother's eyes. But there was something more there too. A sense of knowing, of understanding. Her mother had always been the strong one, the rock in their family. But now there was a softness in her gaze, a vulnerability that Sophia had never seen before. Her mother had been with her through the darkest moments of her life, But she had never seen her like this. She had no idea what had happened to Sophia, what Sophia had experienced. But her mother's heart, even in the midst of her own fear and confusion, seemed to sense that something extraordinary had taken place. She didn't ask many questions. She just sat there, waiting for Sophia to speak, her hand resting gently on her daughter's. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a quiet acceptance that something beyond their comprehension had changed everything. Sophia took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts, knowing that what she was about to say would change everything. Her mother had always trusted her, but this was different. This wasn't just a story or a dream. This was the truth, the kind of truth that could shatter the world around them. She began to speak, her voice barely above a whisper at first, as though the words were too heavy to carry. She told her mother everything, about the 3 signs, about the darkness that was coming, and about the responsibility she now carried. Her mother listened in silence, her eyes never leaving Sophia's face. The words felt strange on her tongue, as though they didn't belong to her. She had never imagined she would be the one to deliver such a message. But here she was, sharing the most important thing she had ever learned. As she spoke, Sophia could feel her mother's gaze shifting, softening, as though the weight of her words was sinking in. There was no disbelief, no denial. Her mother wasn't scared or angry. She was listening, really listening. And that was all that mattered. She understood. When Sophia finished speaking, there was a long pause. Her mother's hand tightened around hers, and for a moment, they sat there in silence, the reality of what was happening settling over them. Sophia didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know if her mother would be able to truly prepare for the coming darkness, or if anyone would. But she knew that she had done her part. She had shared the truth. Now it was up to them. To her, to her mother, to anyone who would listen, to decide what to do with it. Her mother's eyes were filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. There was no fear in them, just a deep understanding that their world was about to change. "We'll be ready," her mother said softly, her voice steady and calm. It wasn't a promise, but it was close enough. In that moment, Sophia knew that they had both crossed a threshold. There was no going back now. They were in this together, and whatever happened next, they would face it as a family. As the days passed, Sophia found herself grappling with the same conflict that had plagued her since her return. How could she make people believe? How could she prepare a world that wasn't ready? The time for fear and doubt had passed. She had seen what was coming, and now she had to help others see it too. The work was only beginning. Sophia had spent weeks, even months, wrestling with the knowledge she had gained. The knowledge of what was coming, of the 3 signs, of the darkness that would soon cover the earth. Her world had changed in ways she had never expected, and now, more than ever, she understood the true weight of her mission. She wasn't meant to merely survive the signs, to simply witness them. No, she had been chosen for something far greater. Her task was to share the message, to help others prepare, to spread the truth before it was too late. She had seen it, the signs, the warnings. And now it was her responsibility to make sure others saw it too. Her mother had listened to her, had understood the importance of what she was saying. But Sophia knew that the task ahead of her was enormous. There were so many people who wouldn't believe her, who would dismiss her words as fantasy or delusion. How could she make them see? How could she get them to prepare? These were the questions that haunted her as she moved forward, knowing that she could not force anyone to listen. All she could do was speak the truth as she knew it, and hope that those who were meant to hear would listen. Every day, as the days grew shorter, as the signs became clearer in her heart, Sophia grew more certain of her role. She had seen the signs. The sound that would awaken the hearts of humanity, the light that would guide those willing to follow, the silence that would make people reflect and reconsider everything they had taken for granted. And she knew that now was the time to prepare. The darkness was coming, but it wasn't just a physical darkness. It was a spiritual one, a test of faith, of resilience. The signs weren't just warnings of a temporary event. They were a call to reawaken, to reconnect with what truly mattered. There were moments when Sophia felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was ahead. She had seen the fear, the panic in people's eyes, and it made her heart ache. But she also saw hope. She saw the potential for transformation, for healing, for a return to what had been lost. She knew that those who were ready, those who had listened, who had prepared their hearts, would not be afraid. They would face the darkness with peace in their hearts, knowing that they had done everything they could to prepare. Jesus had told her that her mission wasn't just about surviving what was coming. It was about helping others find their way back to peace, back to each other. He had given her a purpose, and now it was time for her to fulfill it. There was no going back now. The time was short, and the world needed to hear the message. She began to speak to more people, friends, family, strangers, sharing the message that had been entrusted to her. She spoke of the signs, of the urgency, of the need to prepare. It was not easy. Some listened with open hearts, while others scoffed, dismissing her words as nonsense. But Sophia persisted, knowing that the truth would reach those who were ready to hear it. She didn't force anyone, didn't try to change minds that were set in stone. All she could do was plant the seed and trust that it would grow in its own time. As the days passed, she felt a growing sense of peace within herself. She had done what she could. She had shared the message. Now, all she could do was wait and trust that the signs would do their work. She had no control over who would believe or who would prepare. That was not her responsibility. Her responsibility was to speak, to share, and to prepare her own heart for what was to come. In those quiet moments of reflection, Sophia thought of the people she had spoken to, the faces of those who had listened and those who had turned away. She thought of her mother, who had listened so intently, and who now helped her prepare for the coming days. Sophia knew that the world would change in ways that no one could fully understand, but she also knew that she didn't have to face it alone. Jesus had told her that she wasn't alone, that he was in control of everything, that he was with her always, and that despite the fear and uncertainty that loomed ahead, everything would be okay. Those words had been a balm for her soul. They had given her strength, and in those moments of doubt, she clung to them. "I am in control," he had said, and she believed it. She had seen the truth in his eyes, felt his love wash over her. It was real, and it would guide her, even through the darkest of times. Sophia didn't know when the darkness would come, but she knew it would. And when it did, she would be ready. She would hold on to the peace she had found, the love she had experienced, and she would help others do the same. She knew that those who had prepared their hearts would face the darkness with courage and with grace, and those who hadn't, well, they would face their own trials, but there was always the possibility for redemption, for a return to the light. The message she had been given wasn't just about surviving the darkness. It was about finding peace in the midst of it. It was about remembering that love and light and faith were always present, even in the darkest times. And with that message, Sophia walked forward, ready for whatever the future would bring, knowing that she was never truly alone.